You know the day destroys the night, night divides the day. Try to run, try to hide, break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side.
God bless America. Welcome to The Ranch, everybody. The podcast that explores the people and happenings of Dry Creek Ranch, Eagle, and the greater Boise area. This is another round of the West Ada School District Board of Trustee candidate interviews. One thing to remember, nobody knew what questions I was going to ask. I absolutely did not post any of these videos until the last interview was done, so nobody knew what was actually going to be said in the interviews. And if you could, real fast, please do consider just hitting subscribe and like if you're on YouTube, or just subscribing if you're on Apple Podcasts. I greatly appreciate the support. The more subscribers we get, the better guests we can get on, and the more informed the community can be. And I do want to thank our sponsor for this episode, 208 Land Company. They are a landscaping company doing an incredible amount of work in Dry Creek Ranch and the surrounding areas, specifically because they get the job done. I've heard from a lot of people that have used them or are getting bids from them. They're very, very pleased with them. So if you have any landscaping work that you want to get done in your house, 208 Land Company. My guest today is running for Zone 2. She is a mom. She has children in the school district. She has been knocking on doors since March, which I thought was really amazing. She's obviously somebody who wants to be deeply engaged and contribute to the community and just help overall, which I just so appreciate. She had a lot to say. She had a lot of good things to say. I will let you hear from her. Without further ado, the woman, the myth, the legend, Susie Schuetz. But look, here we are with you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for inviting me.
So look, you have other things going on in your life. I presume you have children in the district, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have a job, you have a family. Why are you doing this to yourself?
It's not doing it to myself. It's for our community. That's the whole reason I want to do this. I believe in serving and serving our community. And I think this is the way to do it. Our children are our future. And I really want to have a part in that. So
I appreciate that. But there are lots of ways to have a part in that. Right?
Yes.
So what is it about education? Like, did you really value your education? Did you, I mean, most people did, right? Mm-hmm. Or is it that you see problems in the school district? Like, why engage in this way? It seems to me that most school boards were not these positions that people felt very impassioned about prior to like 2020. Right. And then once that kind of rolled in, people really started opening their eyes and like, you know what? I should run. Like, or, you know, and not saying inaccurately, I think a lot of talent came out of the pool of concerned parents, and people are like, listen, this isn't a paid position, or it pays very, very little, but it's a service that's important, right? So we have a much greater appreciation. So what is it for you?
So that's a very big loaded question.
Take your time.
So as far as school goes, yes, I did value school. I valued my teachers probably more than I valued anything. They helped me through the hard parts, the hard times when you have no one else to talk to. And I believe all of our children deserve to have a safe environment to have those conversations, right? A safe environment to learn. I see our community being pulled apart. So these are lots of answers. I have them all.
Take your time.
I have them all spreadsheeted in my head.
Listen, I'll take notes and we'll tick them off one at a time.
So, yeah. And as far as West Ada goes, we have grown so much, so fast. And I think that's one place where we struggle is keeping up with the growth. But how do you predict, right? I don't see how anyone could have predicted that 2020 was going to happen. And then the influx, right? So fast. And I don't know, I don't have the answer to that. Typically I ask more questions than I have answers to. I think West Ada has done a really good job in a lot of ways, and I'm excited to take that even further. There was one other part you said, and it was in my spreadsheet, but I can't see it in my head.
Was there something that you felt like really drew you to this specifically?
I think it's just the way the community has been torn apart. I saw some things that happened, obviously a couple years ago, and just I've really noticed that we haven't come back together. sure, we all had this moment of, oh, we all hate each other, whatever that may be, right? We're all mad at each other, not understanding, not communicating. And I feel like we have an opportunity to capitalize on the healing from the COVID years, I guess is the way to put it. So I'd really like to bring the community together. So
I have a great appreciation for that. I was living in California through COVID, which was absolutely atrocious. From an education standpoint, I had a podcast down there, and before COVID, it was, like fun. And I'd do interviews with my friends and have these little kind of thought bubblegum 10-minute pieces on a daily basis for my students to listen to on the way to school, like philosophical musings and things of that nature. But once COVID hit, it really became this student advocacy thing because like you're saying, the community got completely fractured into two pieces, where it was parents screaming from the mountaintops that their kids are suffering and there are major problems with the policies that gotten put in place. And then another group of people that were just wedged in with like, if you want to come back to school, you're literally a murderer. And it was like, how do you bring these people together? And I think quite unfortunately for that community's sake, it hasn't. They pretty much just grouped off, and now they're just battling over other things.
Yeah.
First, there was a group that was like, get kids back in school. And then when kids came back in school, they thought, hey, we actually look at these things very similarly. Like there was a big instance where there was a teenage guy who essentially said, hey, I'm a girl. And the school granted him access to the locker room. And an actual girl in the locker room, biological girl, was like, oh my God, there's a guy in here. Like, I'm 14. I just got out of dance class. Like, there's a guy in here. Like, what's going on? And that's definitely a guy. Right. And again, you saw the split. It's like this group was like, oh, it's so terrible that this girl beat up on another girl. And then, this group is like, that's not a girl. That's a guy. Right. How do you see your role in bringing the community back together from not that split, obviously, but from the fracture that you see happen over the last few years?
I think it's communication, right? When you're talking to a person, like eyeballs to eyeballs, like it's hard to miss the humanity in that. When you have TV, do they still call it TV?
I don't know. Does anybody watch TV?
Right.
I don't know.
When you have
Netflix, let's just say Netflix.
Something, right? When you have media coming at you, social media, whatever it may be, I think we lose our humanity. Whether we're on the side of the keyboard or we're on the side of the monitor reading what was just typed in. And we completely miss. We may be saying the same things, but I hear it differently than what someone else would hear it. And we just need to bring that back together. And I'm doing that. I'm going out in the community. I'm already out there outside of all of this. But I think just having the hard conversations, being brave, having those conversations and really trying to see the humanity in each other.
Have you experienced resistance to this when you go face to face with somebody?
Resistance to what?
The idea that I think whenever you're trying to do something to, bring people back to the table, you almost always experience people that don't want to be brought back. You will naturally experience people who's like, you know what, I've been waiting for you, because I feel like every time I have a face-to-face conversation with somebody, it goes really well, which I can tell you, I have almost never had a bad podcast, even with somebody that I may disagree with, where it's like, we just sit down and talk, and I may have my opinions and not agree with them, but I'm not like mad when I leave. It's just normal, right? Mm-hmm. And like, oh, you're a normal person. So for me, if you came up to me, you're like, hey, Matt, I would like to bring the community back together. I'm like, I've been waiting for you. God bless you, woman. But I think there are other people that are just very resistant to that.
And that's okay. If they're resistant to it, they're resistant to it, right?
So how do we bring them back into the fold? Or is there some level of just error that you're going to have to accept? Like, look, 10% of the people are going to want to be wedged in their opinion.
I haven't met anyone who says, you know what, I'm out. Like, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to have any part in this. I don't want to have any part of any conversation that has anything to do with anything other than what I think and what I believe. I haven't met anybody like that yet.
You're giving me hope. You're giving me hope. I would have thought it was like 25%.
I mean, maybe it is. I don't know. I haven't talked to everybody.
You got to
but...
pound on more doors. I'm sure that person's out there.
Yeah. And probably, and that's okay, right? So I always ask questions. Why do you feel that way? What makes you feel that way? Well, it's useless, and I've never come up to anybody who has stuck by that they absolutely will never have a conversation.
Right. The cynicism and just jaded nature of some people, especially when dealing with, small local governing bodies. It's like, you can't fight it. And sometimes I've actually heard those people's stories at length. I'm like, well, yeah, honestly, I'd feel the exact same way that you feel. Like that's really rough. How do you keep that going in a practical sense? Let's say you get elected, and wonderful, good for you. You have your, celebration that night. And then the next day starts and it's like, oh, this thing about bringing people back together, like I got to get to work now. What does that look like from a practical sense?
Well, it's not get to work now because I've been working.
No.
doing this.
No, I know. I mean,
trying to pull people together.
I didn't mean that as a slight. What I meant is I presume that, the manner in which you're communicating with people, trying to express your thoughts and ideas for a campaign you wouldn't continue campaigning. You would move into like the next phase of communication. That's what I meant.
Yeah. So one of the questions that I'm asking people when I'm at the door is, do you want communications? If in fact I am elected, would you like communications from your trustee?
I think you're supposed to say when you're elected.
Well, it hasn't happened yet.
I'm sorry.
But I mean, they have options, right? They have options. Lucas is a great guy. They have options.
Right.
In the event that I am the one that is selected, do they want to hear from their trustee? And so far, most of them have said yes, right? And they want an email. So they want it pushed to them. They don't want to go find it somewhere. So the idea is just newsletters, right? If they want something different, I am very readily accessible. Tell me what else you want. Communications from the district, there may be things that I can't talk about, right? And that's okay. But I can say, I can't talk about those things, but here's what I can talk about, right? So we can at least have that. I can't tell you how many people I have talked to that have said, I've never had a trustee knock on my door. Now I know that there was a trustee running around a couple years ago and she tried to knock on every single door. So, maybe they missed them, but
maybe they're new to the area.
It could be. Yeah. Who knows? But I think it's important. I talked to somebody, all my days are running together, a couple days ago. And he said, well, I don't have any kids. I'm like, but you pay taxes and you're a registered voter. I said, so you have a say in who becomes your trustee and you are paying taxes. So that piece does matter. And he's like, oh. And then we had a nice conversation about all the things that, that he was like, I've never really thought about that before. So I think that's important. I think people need to understand they have a voice.
Right. And it's in everybody's best interest to have an educated population. Now that means different things to different people.
Exactly.
Right. But I think at the heart of that is it's in everybody's best interest to have thriving, functional contributors. And we call that education. And that word gets taken as like, you're really good at biology or math or English. But it could also be, hey, you're dynamite at, electrician work or whatever it may be, right? Mm-hmm. But like you want somebody contributing. Right. That's what you want. And by the way, I do want to come back to the trades ideas. But I want to hit the list. One thing you said right out of the blocks is that you want safe spaces for kids, right? To have this capacity to talk to people. What do you mean by that?
That's usually the question I ask. What does that word mean to you? So for me, safe spaces are places where kids can be who they are. I also have a very strong spot in my heart for childhood hunger. Hence the orange shirt.
Is orange childhood hunger?
It's many things, but yeah, that's awareness for childhood hunger. Yeah. Hungry kids are set up for failure. So, like, for example, when was the last time you were hangry, right? We joke around and we're like, oh, and then we go get a bag of chips. We're not hangry anymore. But when was the last time you actually had to power through that? And then you had stomach pains. And how long were you able to actually sit there and learn And you have all of the things going on that kiddos have, right? You're a teenager or an up and coming teenager, right? You have all of the changes happening. Your body's growing so fast. Your brain's growing so fast. What do you do with all of that? So to me, a safe place is a place where a kid can go, be a kid, learn, and just have opportunities.
There's a lot there.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. I was hungry a lot of my education before I was able to make money as an adult and, feed myself. Even through college, I was, I think college is classically one of those times. If you've been, it's like you're usually not, swimming in money and, trying to put together 75 cents to get a cup of noodle. But even when I was living at home in high school, I spent a lot of that time hungry. And that was tough, and especially I was very high performing, but it was like I'd be at swim practice as captain of the swim team, having not eaten anything since the night before. So not only did I have to go to calculus and band and, all of my science classes and whatnot, but then I had to go swim, and it was like, I'd be dragging. It was really, really hard. Right. So I have an appreciation for that. There's obviously the Board of Education members have become nationwide had become these really hot button items, right? Like the Chino Hills brouhaha that I'm sure you saw, where the mom was, rallying against state regulation on whether or not the school district had an obligation to tell parents if somebody wanted to be identified as a different gender, things like that. And one point that she made, and again, I don't know this woman, and I just saw snippets, but one point that she really, really hammered was like, listen, the state keeps making the argument for safety. Mm-hmm. And if you think our kids are unsafe at our house, then like call CPS. But like there's a path to alerting the authorities to safety. So I don't know, like when you say like a kid needs to be able to be himself, are you talking more of like be himself and safe from other students, or like be himself and safe from families?
I don't know that it's safe from. I think
okay.
It's safe to. Right? Safe to be.
Okay.
Right? I wasn't necessarily thinking of,
Chino Hills,
gender or anything, none of that stuff.
Right. That's what I just wanted to be clear, because when people say safety, that's a real hot button word, which is why I asked. And that's why I just wanted clarity.
Fair.
Right. Okay. So you're thinking like, listen, we just need a spot where young people can come, they can learn. If they're light on calories, maybe they get some food, but like, they can just be here and, try to make it through life a little bit.
Yeah. And as grown-ups, I feel like it's our responsibility to provide those things for our kiddos.
Talking of safety, all right, physical safety, there are a lot of concerns that people in the country, heightened concerns, obviously, in recent years, tragedies going on around school. Where do you see the West Ada schools as far as safety? Do you feel like the district is doing a pretty good job continuing to upgrade them and take security concerns into account, or do you think that they're slipping a little bit? Because you did say that you felt West Ada was doing some good things, which is wonderful. God bless it. I love compliments. It's like, good for you. Is that one of them, or do you think that's an area they can improve on?
I think we can improve on all of the areas, right? As time goes on, we learn new things. My son's school had a bomb threat last year. They were the first ones of the many that came out. That's quite terrifying to realize that was a thing. Communication was a little rough, but I think they learned a lot from there, right? So that's what I'm saying. Like, there's always room for improvement in everything that the district does and everything that we all do, right? So I think they've done a great job, and there's probably room for some other ideas, right? And people find new ways all the time to wreak havoc at in schools. So always have to be on your toes, I suppose.
Understood. But and that makes sense. Look, it's a constant battle. People are constantly changing. We're going to have to constantly adapt. Like 10 years ago, you wouldn't have to think about like cyber threats. 20 years ago, you wouldn't have to think about like online bullying. But these are things now, right? So we have to change. Is there anything in particular, like a specific pet project or a policy that you think like, okay, we should have closed campuses everywhere, or we should have this everywhere, not identifying anywhere that doesn't have a closed campus, but are there any of those that you feel very strongly about, or is it just like, this should be a priority of ours to continually evolve?
There isn't a spot that I feel strongly one way or the other. I did have, I was door knocking. This was a couple months ago. And a lady,
how long have you been door knocking?
A while.
Wow. How many people have you spoken with?
I don't know. I don't know that answer.
Probably quite a few.
A few, yeah.
That's awesome.
Quite
Okay,
few.
I'm sorry,
yeah.
I interrupted.
Yeah. I think it was March, I think I decided to do this. So it's been...
That's a long haul.
Yeah. I really want to do it.
I can see that.
I really want to serve. So the question
you were
was...
you were saying
Yes.
you were door knocking.
And she had mentioned that the schools, like she feels great with her kids in school. She said, but waiting for the bus, she's like, as soon as they leave those doors, it's a free for all. I was like, really? Tell me more. And I think each school has different, because I know when my kiddo was in elementary, those teachers kind of walk them pretty much everywhere. Now, granted, there's a bajillion kids out there, and sure, a couple of them could meander somewhere they're not supposed to. Who knows?
Sure.
But if somebody really wanted to do something, I mean, that could be a potential opportunity. And I was like, oh, I never thought of that. So it would be something I would ask the questions, is that something we've considered? Is it a thing? What do we want to look at as a district?
Understood. Additional safety concerns. The fentanyl and drug craze, especially with the surrounding states really legalizing things and just pushing it hard. The access is very, very easy. Mm-hmm. Are you worried about that bleeding into the West Ada school districts?
I am always worried.
I
am always worried.
That's a great answer. Always horrified. Every day.
Always. I'm terrified. But I'm a Gen Xer. I don't know why I'm scared.
Who knows, man?
I am no more terrified of surrounding states making policies one way or the other than I am if they didn't make those policies one way or the other.
Okay, well, let me change the question then, because essentially what I would like to know is, are the fact that you have, deadly fentanyl laced, drugs and, obviously illegal marijuana and all kinds of things. And it's not even the marijuana that is grown legally and is like, the hippie organic stuff that I think people should worry about. It's the fact that you just don't know. I used to always tell my students in class, I'm like, look, the real problem with pot at this point is, if you grab like a Bud Light, right? The experience you're in for. And I'm like, and you shouldn't be drinking anyway, but I bet half of you have had a Bud Light. They're like, yeah, all right, that's fair. I'm like, if you have a sip of wine, that's a thing. You have a sip of whiskey, that's a thing. Again, none of you should be having this. And they're like, all right, that's all fair, right? I was dealing with 17 and 18-year-olds. And I said, the problem is, if you take an edible, and this particular conversation came on the tails of a rugby team going on a trip, they were getting on a plane. They, for some reason, thought it would be funny and awesome to fly gonzo. So they ate these edibles beforehand. And of course, somebody breaks 45 minutes later, just loses his mind. He's crying in the corner. These are giant rugby dudes, right? And so the dads, they're getting on the plane and the dads figure they're like, oh, you idiots. What? And they grab, come here, right?
What do you do?
So what happened is I got so worked up, I pulled the headphone out, but it was wild. So one of the dads grabs the kid. He's like, did you take something? Don't lie to me. And the kid was like, yes. So of course they yank him off the plane. And this story had made it into my classroom. I was like, the problem is you take that, you have no idea if you're drinking a Bud Light or you're chugging a bottle of whiskey. You have no idea what's in store. And if there was a bottle of unknown liquid that tasted the same and looked the same to you, like this LaCroix, it could be LaCroix, it could be 151. We have no idea. You're going to drink it down and you're on this train. You don't know where it's getting off. Those are the real big risks. And I worry, and I'm wondering kind of if you're worried about, with the increasing potency of drugs that are very readily accessible, like pot, right? The potency for edibles and whatnot. You don't have smell. You don't have, telltale delivery systems. You don't have to have like some big bong or something. It's like you just pop a mint, right? And you're gone. And then the prevalence of very risky lacing mechanisms like fentanyl, is that something that you think the school needs to heighten its security with? Or do you think that it's like, look, we're doing pretty well. There aren't a lot of instances of these things being problems. What is that for you? I know that's a really big question.
It is. Probably doing pretty well, and that doesn't mean that's it. Doesn't mean, okay, we did it, we're just going to sit back and wait, right? And see what happens. Security, I don't know what security you would do, right? Which is, thankfully, there's 5 people on the board. It's not just Susie coming up with ideas. But I don't know what kind of security you would do. Education, I think, not for that to be a word to get everybody all fired up, but learning and understanding what things could look like, how you could be. What happens if you do it and you didn't know, or you did know? It doesn't matter, right? No judgment there. Just what do you do? What do you do if a friend does it? What does it look like when somebody overdoses, right? What options do these kids have? So I think that is probably, I don't know if we could ever overeducate when it comes to that piece of it. I mean, when I grew up, it was the worst thing you would get is ditchweed, right?
Ditchweed?
Ditchweed. Like
that,
not
like
good
piece
weed.
of a
It's just like
tumbleweed?
pretty much. But that was it. And now it's, who knows, right? I mean,
pesticides
sure, like you
and
had
everything.
LSD and stuff. Like you have like little things that come on little papers and stuff that you would see people do, but you knew what it was. And it wasn't laced with something that's going to necessarily kill you.
Right.
So it's just it's very different. And again, I don't know, I call it legislate to everything, but people are still going to do the things that they want to do. So I think education is really, really important when it comes to drugs. Right. I don't know what else we can do. I'm not saying I wouldn't, that there isn't something we should do.
Could do.
Too many knots, whatever.
Will do.
Could do, will do, whatever. But I just don't see it in my spreadsheet head.
Appreciate the spreadsheet. Appreciate that. And to your point, the potential to overeducate presupposes an end point where you're like, okay, I've talked to everyone. They all got it. We're good. Because you're dealing with new people every year. You're dealing with people that come into say you have this 8th grade program to like really educate. Well, guess what? Maybe somebody moved to the area as a freshman. You have varying degrees of life trauma. You have all kinds of just problems growing up that lead people to make lesser grade decisions. Speaking of, it's curious to me how people think of behaviors with young people like this, like drugs and alcohol, as a function of access. Okay. Do you think that the problems can be addressed by dealing just with access, or do you think it's more of like we're seeing diseases of despair appear in like our 16 and 17-year-olds? Like they don't feel like they're integrating. They don't feel like they have a shot, and we need to help counsel them. But like, which is it? Because some people just say, hey, look, you get rid of it, ain't nobody taking that stuff. And that's true. But then other people say, look, no matter what, they're going to be able to get alcohol really easily, and you're just going to have a bunch of alcoholics if you don't address underlying causes. What is it for you?
I am not the person who thinks that if you just get rid of it, nobody will do it. We'll find something else. We'll find another way to do the things to get. Then what happens? Let's say there is despair, right? Then how are they going to cope? Not that drugs is the way to do it, but then what? What's next, right? It's just going to keep going down the line. So yes, I absolutely believe that there is definite despair, and I would not start at 16. I would say it's a lot younger.
Okay. So how can West Ada spearhead something to help with that? Because I think coming out of COVID, mental illness and despair amongst our teenagers are at an all-time high. What can be done?
I don't know what the district can do because I don't know what their boundaries are. I don't know what they're allowed to do and not allowed to do. Sure. I know the boundaries. But as a community, that is absolutely what we can do, right? We're lifting each other up by being a community, realizing the humanity in each other. Let me slow down a little bit.
Take your time.
Little passionate about that. We like to shame each other a lot, whether we're grown-ups or we're kids or a mixture of both. And when we realize that everyone's struggling in some form or fashion, and the outlets that we use may not be good enough for you, but it's a struggle. And I really wholeheartedly believe that as a strong community, we can help each other become strong again, right? And the despair, you're absolutely right. And it's the despair coming out of the last few years is remarkable. It really is. And just watching how people try to function in life. And a lot of times they go on the offensive, right? Because they're feeling very defensive. And it's a spiral downwards for everybody. So.
Yeah, it really is. It's a tough one. And I agree with you. I think we really lash out and shame people when we're suffering. So
and ourselves. We shame ourselves too, right? We all have that thing well, I know I have voices in my head telling me how terrible I am, but I would imagine everybody has, you have that voice that's like, oh. So.
Did you ever see that Dove soap commercial?
I don't know.
It was I actually saw it about 15 years ago and I was like, all right, you get credit. That was good. So they had Dove went on that whole, like love yourself kind of kick thing. And what they actually had people do is for like a month, every time they thought something bad about themselves, they would write it down in like a little journal, right? Oh. And not very impactful, just that idea, right? And then in an undercover way, they would catch this person at lunch, like in an outside cafe or something, and they'd have two actors sitting next to them, next to, the lady sitting there enjoying her coffee or something. And the actor would read out, one person would be saying to the other the horrible insults they said. And the person, without fail, eventually turned and would be like, I'm sorry, you can't talk to this person that way. And the whole point was like, why? You say it to yourself.
Yep.
So yeah, I think most people can relate to, self-deprecation. For
sure.
So you don't necessarily know that it's something the district can do, but you think from a community standpoint, addressing these, the mental health crisis with teens and younger people is crucial.
Absolutely. Yes.
Gotcha. Opportunities, right? Now, opportunities are some of the things that help people avoid, going down a spiral of death, right? And what's interesting is October is, I got this newsletter from the district. They're like, hey, October is college month. And this is, when we apply to colleges and you look at programs and you apply for scholarships and things like that. Yay. I was in the business of getting kids into college for almost 20 years. And I can say unequivocally, not everyone should go to college, right? When you take into account the lost time, right? When you take into account the lost wages, when you take into account the cost and the prevalence of just junk degrees, it's like, this is not the best use of your time. So that's a thing, right? Not everyone should go, but we also, it appears in the school district, have a lot of alternatives for people like trades training and whatnot. What do you think we're doing well with that, helping students get into college and helping people integrate into trades? And what do you think we can improve on?
I think the outreach is important. I think they've done a pretty decent job of that. My kiddo's in 7th, so we haven't really seen a lot of that. We did go to it was a CTE something or other earlier this year that he was able to go to at the end of last year. But I think the outreach is good. As far as improving upon, I'd be interested to see, what have they done? Like what's in their repertoire of information going out? And then is there a place that we could improve on? That's now my statistics brain is going in.
Gotcha.
Going into motion. So the X and the Y coordinates. So.
I got you. The axes. We gotta know the X. It's no problem. So outreach is good.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then improve upon, it's like, well, It just depends.
It does depend.
Right. I mean, and where I think the metric would probably be how many students graduate without anything, right? Like not going to college, but also not having taken advantage of some kind of career or something.
But that doesn't mean that they don't have opportunities and they're not off doing their own thing.
That's
right?
true.
They could be entrepreneurs.
I don't think there are like that many at 18 though.
There's more than when I was when I was 18. Who knows? Maybe they're working on the family farm. Maybe maybe they went to backpack Europe. I don't know. So that it would be interesting to see what the intended outcome is. Is it really getting kids into college, or is it how many are back into the workforce within Idaho? Is it how many are into the workforce? How many? I don't know. I don't know what they're.
Yeah. A lot of variables, I think, is what you're saying. Yeah, and I actually think that's very fair. Some people, obviously might be going back to work with their parents, and who knows. But I mean, obviously, just doing something, right? Like you gotta have something going on. That with the expansion of career and college, right? Because again, it's no longer this kind of like you got to go to college or else kind of thing, which is great. That takes a lot, right? And with the expanding growth of the school district, again, a lot. How do we deal with the growth, right? From a practical, functional standpoint, is it more schools? Is it expanding existing schools? And how do we pay for whatever solution you're about to say?
Well, we can build, my understanding is in Idaho, we can build new schools funded locally only. So that's bonds and levies. We don't do that outside of local, which makes sense because that's how we are, right? We don't like federal government. We don't like the state government. We don't like people telling us what to do. So we stay local. We allow the locals to make the decisions and build the schools, right? I'm not sure that information is clearly understood amongst voters. To predict the growth, I think that's where I don't know that we can necessarily predict it. It's not my job. Like, I don't know how to do that, but I'm sure there's somebody out there who can. But I think we need to work with, surround it with ACHD, right? We need to work with the cities because West Ada is multiple cities, work with the cities and, just our local taxing districts and to understand what they're looking at. Compass is another one. I don't know if I can say that, but I don't know. But just working with the people who are already planning those things. The school district isn't its own world, right? So pulling everybody together and understanding what they're planning for, which I don't know that we've done a great job of in southern Idaho.
Okay, so it sounds like you're saying we need more school. Like the solution would be building more schools.
Maybe. I guess it depends on the campus. Some schools are kind of... Portables are supposed to be temporary. And they've been there since like the 80s and 90s. I don't think that's temporary anymore. What do you do with the portables, right? Do you expand the school or do you build a new school? And I don't know what the construction costs would be, right? So what does that look like? What is the most feasible, responsible thing to do with our money?
Gotcha.
Once we get the money.
The money. I was going to say.
There is that.
So, and before we move on, everyone talks about growth. Mm-hmm. Everyone talks about overcrowding. Yeah. In your minds, are we overcrowded right now? Or is that a 3, 4, and 5 years from now problem?
You mean in the schools?
That's right.
I think we have room for improvement when it comes to how many kiddos how many teachers are responsible for how many kiddos at any given time. So again, teachers are trying to educate, not babysit and corral, right?
Gotcha. So it just kind of depends on the classroom?
Well, I think it depends on the school, right? With 58 or 59 schools within West Ada, each school is different. So I know Hillsdale was built, and I think they were at capacity the first or second year it was built, and they were turning kiddos away, right? And then we had zoning and all of those other things that happened, but those are things that we really have to be on the lookout for, and we can't do that in a silo, right? It has to be done working with the builders, working with ACH, working with everybody. So working together and having those open lines of communication. So
Gotcha. Makes sense. Okay. So funding. Here we go.
yay.
$500 million was the ask for the levy. Okay. So first, were you to have a magic wand when this levy was proposed? Would you waive it and approve the levy or say no?
Well, it's not my choice. I am one vote.
Would you vote for it with no magic wand, just saying, I think this is a good idea, or no?
I did vote for it. I absolutely did. Because I see the need. Now the question is the oversight, right? How does that work? That's something I think voters don't know. I don't know, right? And those are important pieces. I did vote yes for it for many reasons. So.
Do you want to share your reasons?
I think it's really important. I talked to someone who voted against it because she was concerned about how the money would be managed. And that's very fair, right? If you're not getting the information in digestible bits and pieces, it's out, you don't understand. And that's okay, right? I had faith and hope that the funds would have been managed properly. I believe they would have. And that's also part of why I'm running, is because when I have questions or I don't understand how something works, I jump right in. So I just jump in, show me how it's done, and let me be part of it, right? So yes, I would have voted for it.
One of the concerns that I have heard expressed that I think is really fair with the levy is, even if you voted for it and you were like, yes, it got passed, and then you got onto the board, like, I'm going to be a good steward of this money. You could be 5 years into the 10-year levy. You have a completely new board, people that didn't share the original vision, and the tax base is still on the hook, right? The people paying for this are still on the hook, even though there's no capacity for them to say, hey, you're using this money in a manner that was not promised to me, and they had no recourse. Is that a concern that you think is valid, or do you just believe that it would have been used appropriately?
I do believe it would have been used appropriately, and the way the school board turns over, right? It's only a couple every, however it is, every 2 years or something.
Right. But in 5 years, you could have a completely different school board.
Absolutely. And I believe that it is the board's responsibility, each trustee, it is their responsibility to make sure when the board turns over, potentially it turns over, right? Each trustee, I believe it is our duty as a trustee to convey that information to the person coming in, right? It's the incumbent's responsibility to make sure that the new person coming in understands where they were, all of the things, right? Just like a job, right? You leave a job, you don't just like, peace out, right? You try to set things up for the person coming in to take your job, right? Same thing. So I have faith in humanity. I have absolute faith in our community. I really do.
I know. I just love it. Like, it's great. I'm a very optimistic person too. I appreciate that. You have faith in humanity. So. And
yet I also am a realist, which is why I'm running for the board, because I want to understand it. I want it to make sense in my brain so that I can explain it to other people, right? Who aren't in it all day long, right? So I do. I have faith in our humanity that they would do the right things.
I love it. It's like the best after school special ever. Like,
oh
I believe in people.
I do.
Jan, I love them.
I do.
I believe you. I don't know how you've made it this far and like you just still believe in people. Like the number of people I believe in decreases every day. But it started at a high number. Don't worry. It was like really up here and it's just like a little bit like fractions of people less. Anyway, so all right, so the levy didn't pass though, right? Like that's the reality. Where do we go from here? Because the $500 million is not coming to West Ada, and the needs that West Ada have are the same. So how do we keep going? And what do we do to shore up our finances in the future?
That's a great question. And I have that same question. I know that the board, they have a plan, right? They're working with all of the people involved, and they have plans for moving forward. So I don't know specifically what those plans are. But again, why I'm running. What I don't know, put me in the middle of it.
Is there something that you would modify with the levy that didn't pass that you feel like would have reconciled concerns people have? Like make it a smaller amount, like ask a smaller time frame? Or do you still think the ask is the $500 million and it's more of an education play?
I do. I think the request was absolutely, it was a stretch, right? It was something that had never been done before. And I think education is critical. I would market it differently, right?
How would you market it?
I would absolutely explain, here literally is everything. Here's why we have to do this. Not because this other thing is expiring, which I think a lot of people didn't realize that that was expiring. This was coming in and supposed to cover us for 10 years. Where they can find the financials, right? This is what's coming in. Here's where it's going. Very, very simple. Not in the spreadsheet that's in my head, right? But something that anybody could understand. You just go on and not a million clicks to get to it either, right? Super simple. Click here, boom. Here's how much came in. Here's where it's going. Here's, it's going to whatever school, right? And then just making sure that information is available and having people's names attached to it, right? That's really important. When you know that there's a human on the other side of an email, not just some random email box, if you have a question, you email that person, you email Susie, hey, she's the one responsible for this. I don't understand this piece. Susie responds, hey, here's the situation. Does that help? And then update the information on the site. Make it super easy for people to find the information so that they feel comfortable knowing that their tax dollars are going to the schools, right?
Now, they did have some rudimentary breakdown, right? It was like 15 million parks.
Yeah.
like 30 million jungle gym. Like they had some information, right? So is it that you feel like they literally should have been like, there's going to be 1.5 million going to this school site for this playground, and there's going to be, $500,000 going to this school for this thing.
Yep. Absolutely. Because you can have the really simple stuff. Then you have people like me going, okay, yeah, but where else can I click to find more?
$30 million for jungle gym. Let's kind of flush these numbers out with me.
What kind of jungle gym is this? And who's putting it up, right? But yeah, absolutely. So you have the basic details for those who want to see the details. And when someone's like, that doesn't make any sense to me, click, and it opens up a whole new, 1.5 million goes to a bathroom, whatever. Well, what kind of toilets are those? My goodness. And then, having it where you explain, here's all of the costs that go into it. Here was the last time this was replaced, and here's all the problems that we're having. Here's how much it's costing us now. But having all that information available, if possible.
At the core of it, the school system is trying to educate. And again, that means a lot of things to a lot of people. But one very clear metric of success is grades, right? Grades and standardized tests. Are you happy with where our grades and standardized tests and reading literacy and whatnot are, right? What we're producing for our students? Or do you think it requires improvement?
Again, I think we can improve on everything. Always, 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 always. I struggle with that because what are grades? I have a philosophical argument with myself about grades.
Talk to me.
Why do they matter? What do they show? Do they show you're a great test taker? Do they show you're a great paper writer? Right? Do they show that you're a great artist? What are grades? So I struggle with that. I know that the district has, they have requirements, you have your basics and all of those things, and I get it. And it's all part of the Department of Education. I totally understand that. I just, in my brain, I'm trying to understand how a D student is shamed and then you have an A student who's glorified. Like why? That's just my own thing.
Yeah,
the
sure.
District, I think, I mean, from all of the reports that I've seen, the grades are great. They're doing a great job at, if that's your definition of education is grades and graduation rates, then I think they're doing a great job. And yes, we can always improve.
Okay, let's say my definition of education is not that, or that yours is not that. What should it be?
There are no shoulds.
Okay.
There are no shoulds.
Okay, well, how about this?
This may go down a completely different rabbit hole.
But like, this is very interesting to me. Wouldn't you agree that at every level of performance and competence, there's some way of assessing how you're doing? Like, I played trumpet, okay? And even within band, we had like first, second, third trumpet. I was first trumpet. Holla, me and jazz band, right? And, okay, but like people liked that, right? Like nobody wanted to be fourth trumpet. Right. They wanted to be better, right? So if I'm in chemistry and, back in honors chem and I was getting a C+ and I couldn't understand Miss Trotria because she was a very, very nice Indian woman who I couldn't understand to save my life. I couldn't understand her and I wasn't the best chemistry student. But then there was Saul who was getting, an A+ and went on to get a PhD in chemistry. Like people looked up to Saul and his capacity to do chemistry. Mm-hmm. So what about that dynamic to you is like, but what does that mean? It means Saul was damn good at chemistry.
Yeah.
And Matt couldn't understand Chitra Shrotria, which was her actual name. Chitra was a very lovely woman. But like, I didn't get it, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, it did mean that Saul had demonstrated very significant proficiencies that I was lacking.
Fair.
But you already knew that.
Yeah.
So like, what is it about grades? And again, there's not a right or wrong answer here. Like, I think there are plenty of schools that have in the past or are currently trying to explore non-grade assessment systems, right? Like UC Santa Cruz is a very famous example. They would give like assessments instead of, getting a GPA. I don't know how you go to grad school with like a phone book assessment instead of like a transcript, but they did. Anyway, so what is this for you? Like, what's the philosophical debate?
Again, it's only in my brain, right? I mean, now it's out.
On the mic. It's out now.
I don't know. I know that college is things are changing, right? Like you said, not everybody's meant to go to college. Not everybody's meant to have straight A's. Does that mean that the student who came out with all D's is less of a positive mark for the district than the student who came out with all A's?
Okay, that's an interesting question. If we're in the business of education, and the more successful you are at educating people, the more they improve and the better they get. Like I held myself to a very high standard when I was an SAT tutor for almost 20 years. And it's like, listen, I dealt with students that were struggling to get a 1,000. Okay. So they weren't worse students because they got a 1,000. And my mark was like, look, if they started at 800 and got 1,000 at the end, that's success, right? And the argument could be made, hey, look, why is the student starting at 800? Right? So I understand you're saying, look, are they less of a success? Well, it depends. Are you trying to get people to get at least C's and pass classes?
It goes right back to the question of what is the end goal when they're marketing for college, right?
Well, let me ask you this. What perspective would you say somebody who got D's across the board finishing high school is successful?
Maybe maybe the subjects that they were taught in high school are not at all what they used to determine success in the future, right? We look at them in the future and we're like, wow, look at you go with whatever it may be,
Sure.
right? And oh yeah, I was a D student. I barely squeaked by. I hated school because it sucked. I hate math. I hate all the things. I was too bright for it, right? I got bored. So I didn't go to class, didn't turn in whatever, right? That doesn't mean this person wasn't educated, right? So that's where I look at it from a district perspective. Is a D student the problem, or is it what they do with their education? Like, at what point are we measuring the school district based on simply by test grades, right?
Yeah. Okay. So my brother flunked out of high school.
Okay.
And I think my dad graduated with a 1.9. My brother got a PhD in neuroscience from Princeton, and my dad is a doctor from UCSF Med School, right? So I appreciate that, but in both instances, neither one of them felt, and there were lots of reasons. They weren't blaming people, but they both had to start at the beginning. Like my dad did 4 years at a JC because he's like, I essentially had to get to like high school proficiency. So yeah, if we have students graduating with D averages, then I think you can say like, no, they didn't become like, I think it would be a very rare person who's actually super bright and educated in, calculus and chemistry and all these things, and just chose to not show any indication of that through effort or testing or any kind of verifiable competence, right? Mm-hmm. And again, I get your point, which is it doesn't mean that the person is less valuable or has less of a capacity to contribute or become great.
Sure.
But I would make the argument that the D person is a failure of the school system in that the school system did not motivate, inspire, or convince the person that it's like, hey, listen, even if you're never going to use trig in your life, which you genuinely will not unless you're like a carpenter or an architect or something. Because like you got to find a right angle very few times in your life, right? Anyway, so I think that's really just a reflection of like you didn't reach the kid, right? So nobody's making a comment on the capacity of the individual once they leave the education system. Maybe you want to make a comment on it, but the point is, I think we should hold the school district more accountable for, you have to figure out a way to reach them. Mm-hmm. Like that's on you, right? And if they leave and you haven't reached them and they have Ds, no, I don't think that's something where we should be like, well, maybe it's not, maybe it's okay. It's like, no.
I wholeheartedly agree with reaching the student. I think that is the measure of success, right? Reaching the student. If it's done by grades, then it's done by grades. Like, that's okay. That's why I said this is all
right.
in
We're
my
flushing,
head.
We're
right?
flushing it out in real time.
If the measurement of the success of the district is by grades, then that's how it is. And I think they're doing a good job. We can always do better. If the measurement, because you can get kids to get the good grades, right? There are other ways to do those things, and then they leave high school, whatever, right? They go out. They're like, what a waste of my time, right? What a waste of life, whatever. Yeah, of course, I just did the things, and they're a straight A student, right? They just did the things. If you're measuring success as grades, then yep, that was a success. And then when they leave, they're just like, that was just dumb and a waste of my time, right? I just wasted however many years of my life when I knew that this isn't what I wanted to do, but I got the good grades because that's what I had to do, right? I think reaching students is a completely different story. So that goes back into safety, having an environment for the kids to be able to be themselves, do the things, understand, and find themselves. If you were terrible at chemistry, why were you terrible at chemistry, right? Why were you terrible in your other class, right? Not because you couldn't pronounce her name, but because you didn't understand the words that she was saying, right?
Well, yeah, and I'm sure I can't pronounce her name as well. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing it correctly. So both things are true.
Right? So
right.
Why, right? I look at that. I look at that with my son's grades. I'm like, why do you have a C in math?
This is so curious. What is that?
Man, like, how are all of these things? And then that does not compute in my brain, right? Turns out it was a test taking situation, whatever. And that's fine, right? But that doesn't mean that he's not a really good math student, because he is.
well, very talented
Feel
at math.
bad. Yeah, there you go.
I think
talented at math. Yeah.
Right. And look, my grades were actually better graduating after college than they were in high school for a number of reasons, right? But there was a degree of grit and push through that I just hadn't developed as a 16 and 17-year-old. And I was doing a lot, right? I was really extended, but by the end of college, I was an absolute machine and knew how to just grind and learn. And I was, very committed. And I've always told people, look, you have to realize the GPA is really just a function of not your capacity, but a large part of your willingness to do the things you have to do.
Yep. And
I worked with, for instance, this one girl. She was one of my first students in the first few years that I was working. She ended up going to Stanford. She had a 4.6, and she could not, for the life of her, get above an 80% on the SAT. And this person was such a monster. She was in calculus. She would stay up till like 3 a.m. when she had to get up at 6 a.m. to she was also a gymnast. So she was like a level 10 gymnast going to Stanford. So, and she did graduate from Stanford. She was very successful. But again, there is a certain type of person who becomes so committed and diligent that her actual academic capacity in the time was not as high as other people, but she was very tough. Then you have obviously people that are less tough, higher academic capacity, they get worse grades. You have all kinds of combinations, but I get your point. Grades are obviously imperfect. Just look at college acceptance practices. It's like, okay, do you look at the essay? Parents could have written the essay. Do you look at the grades? It could be disinterest. A high GPA could be grade inflation. You look at the test scores, all right, but it's just one day, and some people argue the test is imperfect, and it's just so it's a train wreck. Like assessing students is tough.
It is.
Yeah.
But again, if that's the measure, then I think they're doing a good job.
That's a fair point. Gosh, we've talked about all kinds of things. Do you have anything that you feel like we're leaving out here? We've talked about like a dozen key things here.
I can't think of anything. My whole point is communication, community, right? Like pulling the community together, and the community can be everything from just your family to all of West Data, right? I'll just keep it there instead of going really big.
The world.
But it really is. The strength of our schools and our students and our future is the strength of our community, right? If we have a flailing community, what success are we going to have out of that? So
that's beautiful. Is there anything else that you would like to express?
No, thank you.
No. Thank you for coming. Thank you for taking the time again. It's after the work day. You're tired. You have your family. I really appreciate you coming out and expressing this. And man, you've been putting in a lot of effort. So I hope things work out for you. Win, lose, or draw. Thank you for hammering the points you're hammering. I think you're absolutely right. I think we could absolutely have better communication. I mean, I love communication. It's kind of my jam.
It's a thing.
Yeah, it's a thing. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This podcast is brought to you by mtustudios.com. If you're looking to start a podcast or make content for any level of your business, MTU Studios can help. Just reach out to us today and we can start shooting tomorrow.